Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and mashallah, welcome back again to our our topic of tonight with our live guest. The topic is business of magic, mashallah, where our eminent guest Dr. Tanvir Syed is discussing the perspective of Islam towards ruqya, towards nazar, towards black magic. Alhamdulillah. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Sab. Jazakumullah.
Inshallah, the slides will work this time. I'll summarize very quickly what we talked about before the break. So going to the second slide, I'd like to dedicate this, like I said, to my father, the greatest sheikh and healer in my life. And like I said, had I listened to his advice, I would have saved myself from many harmful people, a lot of harm. So I dedicate this to him. Inshallah, and the disclaimer we talked about. So here's the outline that I already discussed: nature of man, nature of Iblis, an expose, inshallah, of the four evils: magic, also called sihr or jadoo in Urdu. Evil eye is al-ain, they call, or nazar. And then envy is hasad. I think jalan they call it in Urdu. And then jinn is jinn. The role of the so-called healer we'll talk about, and the vulnerable scenarios we'll summarize, inshallah. A healer versus physician, compare the two in the modern day, and non-magical solutions to magical problems, and a concluding challenge for everyone, inshallah. So here's the ayah I was discussing in Surah Al-Baqarah. There's many instances of the mention of the angels and Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. But what we'll turn to here is مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. Okay, مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. And what we are talking about before the break is that how did the angels know this? How did the angels know ahead of time that man was going to shed blood and create, spread disorder, shed blood, and so forth? And the way we know this is by looking at the nature of each of these creations. And like I said, but if you look at angels versus jinn versus humans, okay, jinns are made of light, and it doesn't take a physicist to tell you this, but take two flashlights and point the beams at each other, you see there will be no conflict, and both will synergize and they'll work together, right? And that's the concept. And so angels, by nature being made of nur or light, you know, they're arwah. There's no incompatibility. They are 100% compatible with one another. Jinn are made of fire. It's similar to the fire that we have nowadays, a little different. But the point is that if you take two different fires, take a fire made from burning wood versus burning paper, or on the stove, and put them together, you see they will synergize in a certain way, but one will overtake the other. So they do work together, but usually one dominates. And that's the concept of jinns. And the way jinns work is that they are intercompatible, but not as intercompatible as angels. Now go to humans. Humans are made of clay, earth, or mud. And that's an absolute no-brainer. Just look right outside the windows and you'll see that when you have anything coming from the land, that there is very little compatibility, almost zero. There's zero compatibility between the two. If you take two seeds, two different trees, and plant them, even the same ones, and plant them, one is going to outdo the other. Okay, one will compete for land and so forth. You can look at, we talked about earthquakes, volcanoes, etc. Land in general, land competes with one another. So the angels knew right away that if this being is created from clay or earth, there's going to be no worship. They're not going to worship Allah, and they're not going to make tasbih and dhikr. They're going to spend their time competing just to survive. That's the idea. So the angels knew this already, all right? And this comes to, you know, and this, I won't go through the details, but there's many ayahs in the Quran which talk about the angels. The angels work through the names of Allah, or rather the names of Allah work through the angels. So when Allah wants something to happen, the kun, the amr of Allah, into the kawn, into the being. I don't want to get into too much aqeedah here, but the point is that any command that comes from Allah comes through His names. And Allah has infinite names. There are 99 most beautiful names. Some names, they say, some of the scholars call it Ismul A'zam, the great name, consists of 7 different names. This is just an opinion, but 7 different names that are working constantly. And then other names are invoked at different times. But each of these names is attributed many, many angels. Some say there's 70,000 angels per row, and the number of rows corresponds to the weight of the word. All right, so for example, Kareem, I believe is 240, for example. You can add it up. You can add up the numbers, the Kaf, Ra, Ya, Mim, and you get certain numbers. And that's the number of rows of angels that are attributed to that name. And therefore the heavier names have more angels to them. And those angels then will come into the physical world, and they'll start to exact their effect in the physical world. So the point is that it's not to get into aqeedah. The point is that the angels know everything about us, about our creation, meaning maybe not our thoughts and so forth, but they understand our creation very, very well, and they understood it before even time was created. The world of the angels doesn't have time, as we know. So angels are very precise in what they do. They're precise in time and they're precise in space. And they exact their effects because they understand creation very, 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 very well. So they knew this already. And so I won't go through all the ayahs, but there's many here. Now, what is the nature of Iblis? Okay, this is very important for the topic today. So what's Iblis' story? Even the non-Muslims, the Christians and Jews, they called him the fallen angel, so they know there was something with the angels. And the point is, he was the king of the jinn, and his worship was so powerful. Okay, his worship was so powerful that he resided and was addressed amongst the angels. So Allah says, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. So just from this ayah, you can see that Allah is addressing the angels. He's not saying, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْجِنِّ. It's lil malaika. He's addressing the angels, and they all prostrated except for Iblis. Okay, Iblis was, I can move the pointer here. Illa Iblis. So it means Iblis was actually addressed amongst the angels, which means even though he was a jinn, he was amongst the angels and worshipping at the level of the angels. That's some very powerful zikr. And if you don't believe that, try it yourself. Try to make zikr to the point where you're elevated amongst the angels. I mean, this is how high he was, how high he reached. So it was pretty amazing. And it says, Aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin. So, and there's many ayahs that talk about this. So what was Iblis' downfall? Iblis' downfall was not that he didn't prostrate. That wasn't the problem. Allah asked him, why didn't you? Ma mana'aka? What prevented you from prostrating to that which I created with my hands? He said, Qala ana khayrun min. Okay, that's the theme of today's talk. Okay, the theme of today's talk is ana khayrun minhu. I am better than him. Okay, I am better than my fellow human beings. I'm better than anybody. Even if I believe I'm worse than everyone, I'm worse than I didn't get the right camera angle. Even if I believe that I'm better, I'm worse than everyone, but even better than one person, that's still kibr, that's arrogance, right? Ana khayru minhu. So this was the downfall of Iblis, in that he believed that he was better. He believed that he was better than Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. Okay. So here's the next question that comes: is what is the arrogance about? Okay, what is Iblis' arrogant? What is he being arrogant about? He didn't have a house. He didn't have any money. Okay, he didn't have the most beautiful women in the world. Other things that men fight for, right? Money, power, women. He didn't have this. What was he arrogant about? And the point is his worship, right? He attained the status of angels and felt he had proven himself to Allah Azza wa Jal, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's made of fire, and he knew that a being made of fire, going back to that original chart, was more compatible with worshipping Allah than something made of clay. So this is a despicable creation made of clay, made of something which is not compatible and always in fight and conflict. I'm made of fire. I'm better. I'm better to you, Allah. I'm more of an awliya than these people can be. These creations can be over here. That was the idea, that he knew the flawed nature. Going back to the slide, he knew the flawed nature of mankind. He knew that mankind was void of physical intercompatibility and was difficult to coexist in harmony. Okay, if you don't believe this, just go get married. It's very simple. You work with, try to live in a home, not where you're the child and your parents are doing everything for you. Live in a home with another human being and see what happens. And you'll understand within a day or two, sometimes within a few minutes, you see that we're difficult people to live with. Okay, even though we might blame the other person, it's usually we're the problem. Usually the one blaming is the one who's at fault. That's the bottom line usually. But the point is that the angels knew this, and Iblis knew this as well. Iblis understood this as, I'm better than these creatures of his creation over here, and so it bothered him. So I don't want to bow down to something which is inferior to me. Looks like the slides are the slides still forwarding? Slides are not forwarding. It looks like. Okay, I'll continue talking, but it looks like the slides are not in sync with what I'm saying. But anyway, so he knew Adam alayhi salam. He knew that Adam alayhi salam's progeny, and Adam alayhi salam himself and his progeny would not be able to worship like he did. And he knew he could also prove that mankind was not as good as him in worship. Okay, and so what he says to Allah, and we know the story already. قَالَ فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. In Surah Sad, and he said, by your dignity, by your izzah, by your might, I shall certainly beguile them all. Meaning, he's swearing on Allah here. Okay, he's swearing on Allah here. إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. And he knew that he could trick majority of mankind. He said, except for the mukhlas, those who are made sincere. Not mukhlis is mukhlas, those who are made sincere by Allah. So he knew that the tawfiq of Allah would be attracted to some of the creations, but he knew it would be a minority. That's why he's boasting, saying, no, I'll get most of them. I'm going to prove that most of these folks are not going to be compatible to worship you, and even though, but maybe a few, and that was his point. Because the next, the slides are really important here. Can we forward to the next slide, inshallah? Oh, okay, inshallah. So so Iblis is not interested in, so a few things. What's Iblis's goal? That's the question. And Iblis's goal is not to make you rich and not to make you poor. He doesn't care about that. Okay, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about making you suffer physical illness. He doesn't care about possessing you. So demonic possessions, making you ill and forgetting your speech when you're on stage, that's not Iblis's goal. Iblis's goal is not to hit you with the dunya that way. His goal is very different. His goal is to prove that mankind, that son of Adam, is worse than him in being a slave to Allah. In other words, what he wants to do is expose man's arrogance. Since he said, Ana khayru minhu, and that was his fault, he wants you to say the same thing. That's it. The simplest goal is to make you arrogant, believe that you're better than others, and then say it. Actually, physically say it. That's the idea. And sometimes that requires increase in wealth. Sometimes it requires decrease in wealth. Some folks are very humble when they're poor, and they'll be arrogant when they're rich. So in that case, Iblis is going to try to get you money. He doesn't want to make you poor in that. He wants to make you money. So just because you have money doesn't mean you made it, right? Just because you have money doesn't mean, oh, I'm successful in the dunya, and therefore I must be very close to Allah. That's not the case, right? If you have an increase in wealth, it could be because that's your downfall. It could be a dalala, it could be maybe not a hidayah, it could be something misguiding you. Other folks, it's decrease in wealth. Some folks are very, very humble when they're rich, but when they become poor, they become frustrated and they become very non-Muslim, so to speak. They lose their Islam, they lose their faith. So sometimes it's in Iblis's best interest to decrease your wealth. Sometimes it's to make you healthy. Some folks are very healthy. If you're a bodybuilder and you have more power than anyone, that could make you arrogant. And other folks, it's illness. Sometimes you have to become ill in order to become evil, in order to be a bad Muslim, in order to not worship Allah, to become arrogant is the idea. And so folks who are ill say, oh, why has this happened to me? Why am I being ill? What kind of what religion do we have? I'm doing all my salat, I'm still ill. So the point is, Iblis is not interested in possessing you and giving you nazar and hasad, and he's not interested in those things. He's interested in doing whatever it takes to make sure that you don't worship Allah. And that's the idea, and worship in the sense that you become arrogant. That's the idea. I'll go to the next slide, inshallah. So Iblis really has no power over you. And there's many ayahs in the Quran, Surah Ibrahim, وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Right? And so what's important here in this slide is وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. That shaitan has no power on you. Okay? Iblis has no power to control you. Okay, all he can do is whisper to you, he can suggest to you, and that's it. You do the rest. And this is very important to understand, going a few slides down, that Iblis does not want absolute power. Okay, he does not want absolute power on us. Okay, why? Because if he were given absolute power, he can't prove his point. Right? If he could force you to not worship Allah, that doesn't prove his point. His point is that even though you have everything on you on a silver platter to worship Allah and be a good worshipper and be a good Muslim and not become arrogant, you won't. That because you're made of clay, you son of Adam, because you're made of clay, you're going to be arrogant, and that's the idea. So he doesn't want power. So to think that demonic possessions, shaitan's coming after me, he's possessing me, he's possessed my aunt, and someone is doing sihr on me and put this in me, and there's jinn in me and possess me, that might be human goals, but that's not Iblis's goal. Iblis has nothing to do with that. He can be used for that, and his minions can be used for that, but that's not his goal. And so when you're thinking about this, who's the enemy? It's stay away from the shaitan, etc. It has nothing to do with possessions and evil eye and so forth. Indirectly it does, but not directly. And so he can only suggest through whispering, and the rest is up to man. All right, so I have a slide here, inshallah it will go up. It's takeaway messages of this presentation. There are 3 takeaway messages of this entire presentation, and if you understand these messages already, you can get up and walk out. You don't need to stay here, and you can turn your TV channel off. The 3 messages we're trying to say: number 1, attributing one's suffering or misfortune to magic, envy, evil eye, or jinn. Okay, that's jadoo, that's jalan, that's nazar, and jinn, is a tool of Iblis that exposes your arrogance. Okay, it's another way of saying I am better than my fellow man. Okay, that's the most important take-home message. That when you blame your suffering and misfortune to one of these evils, and not yourself, to one of these evils, because that's a tool of Iblis to expose your arrogance. Okay, and it's another way of you saying I'm better than someone else, and we'll show that inshallah how that is. The second take-home message today is that the great majority of time, and I mean greater than 99% of time, so-called healers, amils, witch doctors who claim to remove the effects of magic, envy, evil eye, and jinn are in reality just exploiting your arrogance. They're making money off your arrogance, that's all it is. It's usually for the purpose of gaining money, power, or women, the 3. Okay, women. Now, if women are doing this, then they're not trying to gain women. But the point is, majority are men who are doing this, and this is what they do. I have about 15 to 20 years experience in this whole field where I used to actually do exorcisms and all these things. And I also specialize in something called psychosomatic medicine. And that's where a lot of this became exposed to me. That's what I want to do today, is expose to you, kind of expose this whole field and show you what's actually going on. I'm not saying these things are not real. They are real. The Prophet ﷺ said they're real. They're in the Quran. They're mentioned in the Quran. They're real. Even the Prophet ﷺ was affected by magic, and we'll talk about that as well, inshallah. But my point is, we're not talking about whether that's real or not. The point we're trying to make is that when you attribute your problems to this, that's the problem. Okay? When you attribute your problems, to these four evils, and not look at yourself as the problem, then the real problem is you, and that's the goal. That's the goal of this presentation. So let's do an expose of magic. Okay, so first, there's no role for magic in Islam. There's absolutely no role for magic in Islam whatsoever. Okay, Islam is a faith of reason and logic. Okay, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, Allah says 59 times. I looked it up, that's how I know. 59 times in the Quran He says, I don't have the number memorized. My point is this: 59 times He says this, it's sarcasm. Boy, don't you have sense? Don't you have logic? Every time it's mentioned in the Quran, it's sarcasm. I do this for you, I do this for you, I do this for you, and then you worship idols. Have you no sense? It's sarcasm. And the reason there's a reason behind that sarcasm we'll get to in another slide, inshallah. But the point is that magic has no logic or reason. It's only trickery. It's trickery of the eyes. It's a trick that's being done. So Islam is not a haphazard course that asks you to break the existing natural laws and perceptible cosmic discipline. Okay? Islam doesn't say, go levitate, do the zikr until you levitate, and then therefore you are a true awliya, you're the true awliya. Okay? This is something called istidraj, which is very dangerous, and we'll talk about it later, inshallah. All right, so what are some examples of magic? One is stabbing oneself with skewers. There's actually an individual in Cleveland. There's a Muslim in Cleveland actually he actually published a paper on this. He stabs his cheek with a skewer and then takes it out. And that's he claims that this is how he proves his spirituality and zikr and tasawwuf and so forth. Tasawwuf has nothing to do with that, stabbing yourself. If that were the case, shaitan would be the best Sufi in the world, right? He can stab himself 100 times, nothing happens to him. Okay, so stabbing yourself with a skewer has no palpable benefit, right? Anyways, eating glass, walking on fire, levitation, burning objects by staring at them. I call that Superman effect, where Superman had laser eyes, you can look and burn things and so forth. I really wish these slides were up, but I have these all on the slides here. Anyways, these are examples of magic, okay? Now, how does this work? And I'm going to summarize this in just one slide. It's very simple. All these acts of magic, stabbing oneself, eating glass, walking on fire, levitation, burning, a jinn can do every one of those naturally, right? If you take a jinn can stab himself or herself and nothing happens. A jinn can eat glass, nothing happens, doesn't rip the intestines, because jinns are made out of fire. There's no physical being there to be harmed. A jinn can walk on fire as well, right? Because a jinn is fire, so it's not going to burn. Levitation, the jinns, they can transcend the physical universe. They can go through the walls, etc. They can transport from one place to the other and travel high and so forth. And they can burn objects, okay? So the way magic works, it's 3 steps. Number 1, you have to dedicate to yourself. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying you in the general sense. You would dedicate yourself to a specific devil by performing a vile and disgusting act. Okay, and if you want to see how disgusting you can get, the more vile and disgusting your creative mind can come up with, the more jinns you can attract, more devils you can attract. Okay, they love the periods of menstruation, they love the janaba, they love men in the state of janaba, etc. And so I'm not going to go into details. Muslims tend to have ethnic Muslims have a fascination with this. Like, wow, it's so scary. They take the blood from menstruation and they do this and this. It's a shock appeal. It appeals to your nafs. It feels very enlightening, like this is something so supernatural, etc. It's actually vile and absolutely disgusting. To sit in a circle in the desert and not take a shower and not get up and not do istinja for 40 days is absolutely vile and disgusting. Okay, but what they do is they do something like this, and then that allows the devil to enter your spirit, and the devil does something in exchange for you. And it's usually not Iblis himself; it's usually the minions. And what they will do is they'll come in your body and take over the spirit. So when they take over the spirit, they basically your clay or your mud, your solid figure, is temporarily taken over by this fire substance. So then you can stab yourself, you can eat yourself, you can walk on fire, you can do all these different things. So there's no big deal. There's no big deal about this. It's just that a devil is taking your place and doing these things for you. In other words, you're allowing a devil to possess yourself is all it is. So that doesn't mean that you're a spiritual person, you're very close to Allah, and nothing like that. So that in a nutshell is how magic works. So the first magicians who were out there, who were they? Well, there were these people. Sorry, what was that? Okay, sorry, I was taking some instruction here. Yeah, so the first magicians, who were they? The first magicians were people who wanted to become spiritual, but they didn't want to do the tazkiyah part of it, right? They didn't want to fast. They don't want to give up food. They don't want to give up meat, all right? So what they did is they realized that if they go out and live in a cave or in a forest and you stay there for a day or two, you attain some taqwa, some kind of spirituality, because you remove yourself from the needs like food, water, the modern day earth, modern day society pleasures and so forth. And so they tried to attain the superiority, but they couldn't do it. And so the devils came along and they made deals with these devils, and they said, listen, we'll make you powerful, we'll let you levitate, we'll let you eat fire and so forth, just do this and so forth, and do these certain vile acts and so forth. Those were the first magicians. And so there's a famous story in Syria. This happened. There was a magician healer, and he had a jinn companion, and what he did was he sat underwater for 2 weeks. This is not too long ago. It's actually very recent, within the last century. And he sat underwater for 2 weeks, 2.5 meters under the water, and he was holding a prayer bead saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. He was sitting there under the water. And so people would come from far to watch this miracle, and they see this guy sitting here. And it became a problem for the Syrian government. If you know the history of Syria and the government in the beginning of the 1900s, yeah, they were looking out for espionage and these things happening and so forth. And so they became concerned. Oh, there we go. I got the slides back. Okay. And so I will just say next slide. You can switch the slide, inshallah. But this slide is the one we're on right now. So the so-called sheikh was under the water and moving the beads and saying the kalima, saying La ilaha illallah, saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah over and over again. So a lot of people came from far away and wanted to visit this man and see who is this great sheikh. And they said he must be really religious, very close to Allah, must have angels around him. And finally the police became, the government became very weary of what was going on because of so many people. So they actually went to his house, and they found that in one of the rooms there was a tunnel. He was actually sitting in the tunnel with his food and water, and he was actually just living there doing his normal daily activities. They put him in shackles and brought him out. And then the figure under the water disappeared right away. So it was obvious it was the jinn. The jinn would be under the water, while the sheikh, or what the so-called sheikh, I should say, not a real sheikh, the pseudo sheikh was in his room sitting in a tunnel somewhere. Just an example. I mean, it's very simple. This betrayal was revealed. So these magician healers are very similar to magicians, and what they will do, they propose an alleged relationship between themselves and Allah. They claim to have power to make predictions through hidden connections. They surround themselves with a holy halo. They mask themselves behind beards, outward appearance of religious people. In fact, this happened so much that I believe it was maybe in the UK 100 years ago or so, where one of these scholars actually passed a fatwa, a very well-known mufti passed a fatwa, and I believe it was in the UK, that you are only allowed to wear white, full white, if you have a degree, if you have an ijazah, fazal ijazah in hadith, ijazah in something. Which sounds very absurd, but you can see why they would do this, because there were imposters walking around everywhere, putting on these white outfits and going and doing this kind of bogus trickery over here. So, anyways, what's very interesting though is that the magician healers, the people who claim to even heal the magic, are usually beggars. They're a high-level beggars, usually ask for money. In fact, they claim to perform magic and undo spells of magic for the sake of da'wah to non-Muslims, but they never do. They're always dealing with Muslims. They don't deal with non-Muslims, they deal with Muslims. Right? And and why is that? The question is because Muslims will actually pay them. They actually make money. So the question that comes up is, they do these tricks and illusions and have these wondrous powers, but still seek money for their skills. They still seek money. If you had all these powers and you had these abilities to do whatever you can do, why not make your own food? And why not create your own family? Why not have a jinn family doing everything for you then? Why do you need to actually collect money? And one question that many scholars have brought up is, why have they not liberated their lands from occupation? How many lands are occupied by non-Muslims? Muslim lands are occupied by Muslims, by non-Muslims. Why have you not liberated your lands? Why have you not fought your battles? Right? The Battle of Badr had how many? 1,000 angels. Right? Why don't you have your jinn army come in and fight the battles for you? And they can't, because it's all trickery. It's not real. And very interesting, if you go back to the Quran, I believe in Surah Al-A'raf is the first time, but I have here quoted Surah Shu'ara, فَلَمَّا جَاءَ السَّحَرَةُ قَالُوا لِفِرْعَوْنَ أَإِنَّا لَنَا لَأَجْرًا. I love that. أَإِنَّ لَنَا لَأَجْرًا. I said it wrong. أَإِنَّ لَنَا لَأَجْرًا. Will we have a reward? See, Allah mentions this, right? As soon as Fir'aun, he wanted to outdo Musa alayhi salam with the staff, he called the best sahirin alim, the most knowledgeable magicians. And what did they say? Will there be a reward for us? Will we make any money out of this? They wanted money. So the point is that even back in the Quran, even the time of Fir'aun, the magicians still were always asking for money. It's all about money, right? So, and you know, وَأَلْقِ مَا فِي يَمِينِكَ تَلْقَفْ مَا صَنَعُوا إِنَّمَا صَنَعُوا كَيْدُ سَاحِرٍ وَلَا يُفْلِحُ السَّاحِرُ حَيْثُ أَتَى. It's very important, the last part, it's وَلَا يُفْلِحُ السَّاحِرُ حَيْثُ أَتَى. Very important. No matter where they are, what time, what geography, what place, doesn't matter, they will never be successful. They never reach falah, not in the dunya or the akhirah. That's why they're always begging for money. They're always asking for money. So they're begging for money in the dunya and they've lost their akhirah as well. So they're bankrupt, they're muflis. They're muflis in the dunya and muflis in the akhirah, right? So the next slide, please, is the mind is a slave of the heart. I hope you can put this slide up. This is a very, very important one. So this slide right here, perfect, thank you. Jazakumullah khairan. Whatever the heart believes, the mind works overtime to justify and fulfill. And I'll tell you, no one knows this better than the pseudo-sheikhs. Okay? No one knows this better than the healer, the quote healers of magic. They know this very, very well. And that's why Allah says in the Quran 59 times, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Okay, do you have any aql? And the point is, it's not about the aql. It's not about logic. Okay, you can see some of the most intelligent mathematicians, the most intelligent logic experts, logisticians, mathematicians, statisticians, are idol worshippers today. Even today, you'll find some of the best mathematicians come from parts of the world where they worship idols and stones and so forth, and they have practices which make no sense. You ask, why is that? If you're an expert in mathematics, it means your logic is excellent. You know 1 + 1 = 2 and more than that. Then why is it that you still worship idols? Why do you worship things which have, you know, مَا لَا يَنْفُ لَا يَضُرُّ? They don't benefit you, they don't harm you. Why? It's because it's not about the mind, it's about the heart. Okay? It gets into aqidah again. The heart is actually the base of the mind. Okay, but the point is the mind uses logic. It makes connections. It looks at the asbab of Allah and tells you this causes this, causes this. What's the sabab? What's the natija? What's the cause? What's the result? The mind does this, but the heart doesn't. The heart just believes. Okay, and that's why it's really amazing. The Quran begins with الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Who are هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The Quran is a guidance for those who have taqwa. Those are God-fearing. Who are they? It's الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Right there is no logic. You can't see. You're believing in something you cannot see, because that will not come from anywhere but Allah. All right? So that's not something that you can arrive to with logic. Okay? It's very, very important. In fact, if you ask many of those who have converted or reverted to Islam, what made you Muslim? You get 100 different answers. And so you'll think, no, find out what it is. We always say, find out what made them convert to Islam, how they came to Islam. Try taking that same reason that they converted and apply it to someone else. It won't work. Okay? If you go on the street and do da'wah, we did this, a group of us, we lived in Mexico a long time ago, and we used to go in the streets and do da'wah in Mexico. Had nothing to do with logic. It's a matter of who Allah puts that, if Allah puts that spark of iman in your heart, you will justify yourself. In fact, it's interesting, if you look at the convert or revert Muslims, if you look at them, and all these issues that Muslims have a problem with, like you look at issues that Muslims, like cutting the hand off when you steal, and polygamy, for example, أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُم, the things that Muslims even themselves are confused on, the convert Muslims don't ever have a problem with it, because it's in their heart. They come in like, yeah, we accept the religion, we accept the deen. And it's very interesting. So the point is, it's all about the heart. And this is very dangerous, okay, because it's about the heart. And if you look at the slide, you know, magic and so-called miracles, they appeal to the heart, not the logic. That's what's dangerous. So if someone comes and tells you, I know this sheikh, he was so amazing, he used to levitate, you know, and you see someone levitate, you automatically, it affects your heart, you start to justify everything. You will overlook all the sins. This pseudo-sheikh can commit adultery left and right, and you'll overlook it. You say, no, he's removing jinns. No, he's not. No, this is some kind of it's an illusion. He's not committing adultery. I mean, you know, a lot of folks get into trouble this way, is that we assume, because we believe in our heart something, that the mind starts to justify very, very quickly. And this is the fitna of more intelligent people. You know, the more intelligent Muslims, their fitna is very different from the quote dumber Muslims like me. The more intelligent Muslims are very, very different. They can see the cause and effect so quickly that that's their fitna. Okay, you start to believe that you commit a lesser shirk that way, right? You start to believe, no, the reason I caught the train is because I ran this fast around this way. Because I knew this, I saw this bus coming this way and this bus coming that way, and I ran perfectly down the center. You start to justify things very quickly, and that's the fitna. The aql is a big fitna for those who are intelligent. Those who are dumber, we have a different fitna. But my point is that if you're intelligent, doesn't mean you can come out of this. That the intelligent people doesn't mean that because you're intelligent you're immune to this. My point is the intelligent people will believe this even more. In fact, I've heard many times very intelligent people say, everything was going great, and then I went and I gave a speech, and all of a sudden I got sick. It had to be nazar, right? Okay, why? Oh, because logically I wasn't sick before that. It must have been this. So the intelligent people, they quickly make that association. So just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you're immune from this. You can be a sucker to this stuff as well, right? So, and the idea is, upon observing or hearing a miracle, the mind will immediately employ logic to justify the sanctity and supernaturality of a magician healer. Okay, that's the idea. It's from the slide. And this is precisely why Iblis introduced magic in the first place, to make man believe in intermediaries that can intercede between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and man. That was it's one of the reasons of introducing magic. All right, so Muslims who praise religious men for their miracles, or the karamat, they easily fall into this trap. I'm not saying that karamat doesn't exist. It exists, and there are people who can do some amazing things. But when you start to praise individuals, say this sheikh is so great because he can do this. He can touch someone and heal them, and he can look at someone and their sight comes back, and they were blind before. In other words, when you say this sheikh was so great, insert miracle here, that's the problem. Okay, that's when you start to fall trap into the supernatural stuff. In fact, the last part of the slide, it's about istidraj, very important. It's very dangerous, and this is when one is gifted with supernatural powers for the sake of being led astray. Okay, right? Allah can misguide you in many, many, many ways. And you can be as creative as you want. You won't come, not even an atom's weight of what Allah knows and what Allah can, how He can misguide you. And one of the most dangerous ways that Allah can misguide you is through istidraj. It's very, very dangerous. And Junaid Baghdadi, Allah yarda alayhi, he greatly feared istidraj. In fact, he was a great, great, great scholar, very, very spiritual. He was an expert at tazkiyah, right? And he had no nafs, this man. And he made a statement. He said, if I were to enter a forest, I don't know the Arabic, but he said, if I enter a forest and all the birds started saying, Assalamu alaikum ya wali Allah. He said, I would turn around and run the opposite way as fast as possible, because that's istidraj. Because you'll start to believe, yeah, I'm of the awliya, right? And it's very interesting. In fact, what made Junaid Baghdadi and Abdul Qadir Jilani and many of the great scholars of our past, what made them so spiritual was not these miracles. Even if they had these karamat, that was not what made them amazing people. What made them amazing, what made them awliya, was their jihad in life and what they did. In fact, Junaid Baghdadi, I believe, since we're talking about the same individual, he came in a dream after he had passed away to one of his students. And this is very typical. The awliya usually come back, many of the shuyukh come back in the dreams of the murids, of the students, and the murids always ask the same question: what happened? Where'd you end up? And what Junaid Baghdadi said, he said, alhamdulillah, things went well. And they said, what was it? Was it the poems you wrote and the zikrs and so forth? It wasn't. It was the nawafil salat. It was the 2 rakahs here, after salat al-maghrib. It was the tahajjud salat here. It was the few nawafil salat that did it. That's a miracle. Okay, when Allah puts that in your life, that is a true karamat. Okay, not that you can levitate and whatnot. And we'll get to that later, inshallah. Junaid Baghdadi, even for an example, when he was dying when he was on his deathbed, his student or someone, I don't know who, someone was asking him a question. He stopped talking. And then after some time, he answered, after a few minutes, and the student said, why didn't you answer? He said, I was doing my wird. He was on his deathbed. Okay, man on his deathbed. So he's not worried about his death even. He said, no, this is my daily wird, my daily zikr I have to do. He was doing it on his deathbed. So that's what makes the awliya. It's not about the miracles and so forth. We'll go to the next slide. So why did Allah create magic? So a lot of folks ask this question, why did Allah create magic? Well, it's a means of dalala. And I believe it's Surah Al-Hijr, وَلَوْ فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَابًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَظَلُّوا فِيهِ يَعْرُجُونَ. Allah addresses the kuffar here. In the beginning of the surah, Allah addresses the kuffar, saying that if we had opened, they keep asking for, show us a sign, why don't you have an angel, show us a magic, show us some kind of magic. Allah says if we opened the door of the skies and they were able to ascend into the skies and so forth, they would have said, لَقَالُوا, they would have said, إِنَّمَا سُكِّرَتْ أَبْصَارُنَا بَلْ نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ مَسْحُورٌ. They would have blamed magic. It was very interesting, meaning the purpose of magic, or one of the purposes of a great purpose of magic, according to the Quran, is that it's a protection from iman. It's so that the kuffar will not believe in miracles, will not use miracles as a way of guidance. That's the idea. Otherwise, the Prophet ﷺ would have split the moon, everyone would have converted, and it was done. Then everything's done, right? And then Allah says, I will fill u'iddat al-kafirin, that He was going to fill Jahannam, the hellfire. He's going to fill it with mankind and jinn altogether, right? And so the point is the magic was created so that logically the kuffar have a way, the disbelievers will have a way to fight off, to ward off iman in the form of miracles coming. Otherwise, miracles would have convinced him. So it's very scary if you think about Muslims, and Muslims ourselves, we talk about magic, we talk so about miracles and these things so loosely and with such admiration, but the point is it's used for misguiding more than anything. So we'll go to the next slide. There's a strong argument that folks usually paint, at least folks believe it's strong, that magic in the Prophet ﷺ. Well, they say, yeah, but we can be affected by magic because Rasulullah ﷺ was affected by magic as well. You know the story about the knots, the 11 knots thrown into the well and so forth. But something very, very important, look at the second part of the slide here. Rasulullah ﷺ, he never sinned as a result. Okay, he never sinned. Okay, when he was affected by magic, yeah, he was a bit disorientated, maybe a bit confused. And some scholars even argued that he never was affected even from magic. And they believe that this was introduced by the Yahud, that they introduced. That's another opinion. But let's assume he was. Okay, he was. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Number one, he never went away from Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principles. He never abused or hurt any of his wives. And he had 6 at one time. Okay, that's not a party. When you have 6 at one time, yeah, that's not easy. Imagine one. If you can't even handle one, if you can't even control your mouth, if you're screaming and shouting and throwing things with just one, imagine he had 6 at one time, and he never hurt any of his wives, he never abused them. Okay, he never lashed out in anger. He never used profanity. He never complained about being a victim. Never once. He said, "What's wrong with me? Look at me. How pathetic I've become." He never missed a fard salat. He never missed a salat. He might have repeated salawat because he might have forgotten that he prayed, but he continued it though. He prayed his fard. He never disconnected from family members. Never. He never disconnected. Oh, you must have done this on me. You must have done that on me, and so forth. So we cannot attribute these acts, these sinful acts that we do. We can't attribute them to magic. That's what's very important. The next slide. What about miracles after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So the point is that real holy men do not need the support of miracles to prove themselves. Okay, if you're truly a holy man, you don't need a miracle. And Amin Kiftaro says the real miracle is to break the habits of your own spirit, not to break cosmic discipline. That's extremely important, and we'll come back to that inshallah, that a true miracle is not trying to break the laws of the physical world. In fact, the physical laws of the world, the physical world, that is the miracle. The fact that gravity exists is a miracle. If you don't believe, if you don't appreciate the importance of gravity, then lay down in bed for 2 days. Don't get up. Watch what happens to your bowels. Okay, watch what happens to your body. Gravity does so much for our blood flow. I ask that any doctor will tell you how many bed ulcers form and all kinds of ileus and bowel movements stop, and you become very sick and ill. You can't breathe. Your lungs collapse. Gravity is what is responsible for all this. So that's the real. So defying gravity and levitating, that's not a miracle. The real miracle is gravity itself, right? And so if you examine the manners and the deeds of magicians and the healers who pretend to be good Muslims, you'll find that most of them are the greatest perpetrators of sin and adultery. This is very, very common. You'll see it in the entire population. It is mentioned in the Quran as well that they are the most evil of people. So please go to the next slide. This is a very crucial slide here. This is on one of the take-home messages. On the left you have supernatural acts. On the right you have pious acts. Okay? What's the difference between these two? So the supernatural act, it ends with the act itself. So if you stab yourself with a skewer and you pull it out, it's done. Okay, great. Now what? What effect? What benefit did it have? So if you look at the bottom of the slide here, it says finite effect. You have a start, you have a finite effect, and you have a finish. And the finite effect is just people saying, "Wow, how great it is." And it's kind of silly. Stabbing yourself with a skewer is not that big of a deal. You can put on a cushioned suit, and stab yourself now, right? Walking on fire, well, put on firefighter gear, and you can do the same thing. Levitation, go into a hot air balloon, go to the airport, you'll see plenty of levitation everywhere at the airport, right? So it's not a big deal anymore that you can levitate. Burning objects by staring at them, yeah, you can take a laser pointer and point it at something, you can burn it. The point is that's not a big deal. The modern world has caught up to these things. This is not an example of something great and everlasting. Now the pious acts, those are real miracles. Self-criticism. Criticize yourself. Try that. That's a miracle. You take a stubborn man and say, "You're stubborn." And now sit in a corner and tell yourself you're stubborn. Try it. That's a miracle. That's harder than moving a mountain. In Umar radiallahu anhu's words, you can move a mountain easier than you can have a man change his mind. A stubborn man change his mind. Never raise your voice in anger against your spouse. Women and men, both. Don't raise your voice in anger against your spouse. That is a miracle. That's an absolute miracle. Try 24 hours. 24 hours, don't raise your voice against your spouse. That's a true miracle if you can do that. Never criticize or belittle your husband, as for women, in front of others. Try that. Don't criticize. When your husband leaves, don't complain about your husband behind your husband's back to other women. I give that challenge to women. That's a great miracle. I mean, some cultures are very good at that, and some cultures are not very good at that. The culture I come from is not very good at it. So the point is this, these are real miracles. Pulverize your anger. Never miss the tahajjud salat. Okay, that sleep is the most precious sleep. It's very, very precious to sleep. The talk on Wednesday, we talked about the benefits of sleep. But the point is that the tahajjud salat, salat qalilan min al-layli ma yahja'un. That's a very, very precious sleep you get. And you give that up every single day for tahajjud salat, that's a miracle. And that's all leads to tawbah, which is very important. What's very important though is the bottom right of the slide is that it says this is an infinite effect. So a pious act versus a supernatural act has an infinite effect that goes into the akhirah. That's that is a true miracle. So prophets, they're mortal humans. The next slide. And they say this, right? قَالَتْ لَهُمْ رُسُلُهُمْ إِن نَحْنُ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. So the prophets themselves are saying, yes, we are mortal human beings. If we get stabbed, we bleed. We can die from mortal wounds and so forth. And it's well known, right? فَرِيقًا كَذَّبْتُمْ وَفَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ. Right? The Bani Israel killed 100 prophets in one day. Some of the scholars say 120 prophets even, I've heard. They say they killed them. So the point is that they can be killed. You can't stab them with the spear and come out and nothing happens. No, they will be killed. They're mortal human beings. Right? And if you look at the next slide, the Prophet ﷺ were killed. Rasulullah ﷺ was injured in the Battle of Uhud. He was injured. He was bleeding. One of the Sahaba actually drank his blood. So he was injured as well. The Sahaba were martyred in battle due to stabs and wounds. They didn't use magic and they didn't use stab me. Go ahead. They had a sword and let's stab me with the spear in my belly and I'm going to survive through my magic and so forth. I'm going to levitate above you and then hit you from the top. No, they fought on the ground, and they were not honored because of cheap tricks, levitating, stabbing, and holding their breath for hours underwater. They were honored because of their character and how they were, how they practiced the deen. So something very important. Now we're getting to the crux of the talk here. So blaming magic for shortcomings, that's a fuel for arrogance. Okay, when something goes wrong in your life, and it's all the same thing. For years, for centuries, since the beginning of time, it's been financial loss, illness, unable to marry, infertility. The majority of the problems come in this way. We get angry. And why do we get angry? Because we feel, when we get angry, we believe that we're oppressed. That's why you get angry. Something's not working your way. What you want to happen is not happening, and therefore you're oppressed. And what anger is, and I believe it's Sheikh Shabrawi, he has a book called, I think Maratib al-Nafs, I think it's the degrees of the nafs, of the soul. And he describes anger, he defines anger as agitation of blood flow in the heart attached to the need to exact revenge on somebody. Okay, that's the exact definition of anger, and it's very true. The next time you get angry, feel your heart. Just close your eyes and feel your heart. You're going to feel an agitation in there. And that agitation is connected to the need to exact revenge on somebody. You want to hurt someone. That's why you see people get angry, they kick the floor sometimes. You want to blame the floor. Or you hurt someone in front of you. If you're in a bad mood, you start blaming everything on whoever's in front of you. And that's the idea. That's what anger is. And what's important here, if you go to the next slide, the next slide's a little tricky. You have to click through it. But are you able to go to the next slide? Oh yeah, it's not coming right. Anyways, well, it's supposed to go one step at a time. That suffering leads to anger. Okay, well, anger then leads to revenge. Then revenge leads to blame. And then when you want to blame, the question is, who do you blame? And so you first blame, anytime you have a problem, your family, friends, and spouse. Why do you start with them when you blame? You start with them because they're the only ones who will listen to the idiotic things you have to say, right? Your parents have no choice but to listen to you. They're stuck with you. So that's why usually folks who, especially youth, happens very common. You become religious. You start doing religious things, whether it's growing a beard, praying a salat. All of a sudden you're the sheikh in the house and you start criticizing your own family. Okay, you're going to go preach to everyone. The reason it works, you went to the neighbor's house and started preaching to them, they'll kick you out. But your parents, they love you, and they're forced to listen to all the stupid things you have to say. So they have to sit there and be your audience, and you start yelling and screaming at them. Well, anyways, friends, family, then spouse. Spouse is a great, if you want to get your anger out, just abuse the spouse. It's the easiest way to do it. And then there's peers and coworkers. After that, you go to leaders. Then you blame society. Say, oh, all the suffering I have, it's because of society, it's because of the laws, etc. And then finally you blame natural laws. You say, the world just works against me. It's just, I always have bad luck. And if that doesn't work, then the suffering will continue, obviously, because the problem is not those things. Then you end up blaming the supernatural. And the real problem is you. That's the actual problem. So you don't have to blame anybody else. Turn the finger to yourself. That's where the real problem is. So go to the next slide, please. Blaming the supernatural, fuel for arrogance. And here's what follows. I am so superior to others that it took magic to hurt me. When you say magic has affected me, that's what you're really saying. Okay? What you're saying is, I am so superior that people couldn't hurt me. And they're scared of me, and they couldn't come in front of me and insult me. So they had to sit behind somewhere and do magic on me. Okay? In other words, the magic, you believing in magic, whether magic is real or not, whether it's happened or not, the point that you're attributing your flaws and your suffering to magic, it means that you're saying you are better than other people. It's another way of saying, Ana khayru minhu. And that was Iblis's goal. Okay? You say, I could not possibly be the cause of my suffering because I am too perfect. Therefore, in other words, I am better than others. So every time you attribute something to magic, 99.9% of the time, if not 100% of the time, it's a display of your arrogance is all it is. All right. Next, look at evil eye. Next slide, please. Evil eye, envy, and jinn is the exact same thing. And this is the take-home message of this talk. That evil eye, I am so good that someone gave me the evil eye. Right? So if I give a lecture somewhere, or I take a picture and post it on, I take a selfie and I post it on WhatsApp. Alhamdulillah, I've never taken a selfie, I've never posted it. I don't even have Facebook. Alhamdulillah, I never did. And the point is that when you do this and then all of a sudden you get ill, we say, oh, it must be the evil eye. What do you mean the evil eye? What you're really saying is, I'm so beautiful. I'm so good that people are jealous of me. So the point is, when you attribute anything to evil eye or magic, whether it's, I'm not saying it's not real, it's real. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said that nazar is haqq, it's true, it's there. But when you attribute it to it, you're just showing your arrogance. And that's what Iblis wants. Iblis doesn't care about giving you the evil eye. He wants you to believe that it's the evil eye so that you'll become arrogant. Envy, hasad, in the Arab cultures, it's very famous. In the Indian Pakistani cultures, nazar lagi, they say right away, it's an evil eye. The Arab cultures are different. They say hasaduni, hasaduni. They made hasad on me. Why would they make hasad? Because you're superior. Because you're saying that I am superior. I'm better than everybody else. So naturally they're jealous of me, is what it is. And then jinn, same thing. I'm so good that no human could hurt me. It had to be a jinn. Some jinn had to come and hurt me instead. So the four evils are real. But just don't blame them, is the point. Okay, blaming the four evils for your own fallacies is the real evil and exposes your arrogance. The next slide. And the other problem is when you blame the four evils for your problems, it stuns your survival skills. You don't develop your survival skills. If you think I got sick because I gave a lecture one day and I led the salat, my voice was so beautiful that someone did nazar on me and now I got sick, you'll never learn why you actually got sick. What if you ate something wrong? What if you're not sleeping right? What if your stress levels are too high? Okay, what if you have too much anger as a problem? So that's the idea. So the next slide, it's the role of the false healer. You have to be very careful of this. Okay, this is a business. This has become a business. And if you go to the next slide, there's something called the healer experience, we call. It's basically 8 steps. And most of us have gone through this. A suffering client goes to a healer. Okay, because again, you're arrogant. You're arrogant, you believe that you are better than everybody else, so someone must have done magic on me. That must have happened. It can't be me. Someone else did this on me. So you go to a healer. So step 2, what happens, the healer diagnoses some supernatural affliction. Says, oh, you have magic, you have evil eye, you have envy, you have jinn. The client is very pleased. Why is the client very pleased? Because now your arrogance, your superiority is confirmed. So you believe you're superior. Now the pseudo sheikh will come and tell you, not the real sheikh, the pseudo sheikh comes and tells you, yes, it is nazar. Ha, see, I knew it. I'm superior to everybody. I knew someone did it to me. So now this is a match made in hell, not heaven. This is a match made in hell. Your arrogance is fueled by this healer, because the healer is saying, yeah, you really are superior. You're very special. You're so special that someone gave you the evil eye. All right? And so the healer now gains the client's trust. It's a matter of the heart, not the logic. So then the healer prescribes a cure. If you can go back to the slide, please. Healer prescribes a cure. He gives you an amulet, a ta'weez, a prayer, a ritual, numerology, and takes payment from the client. One of the signs of a true healer is you see they don't take payment ever. Not even indirectly, directly, not even water. They take nothing from the client. That's the key. But usually something is given. The cure works. Now why did the cure work? Why did the ta'weez work? Because it's really magic? Because it's really evil eye? No. It's because you're going to make it work. Because it's in your best interest to make it work. That proves that you really are superior. So it's a very beautiful match made in hell, where you are arrogant, and so you blame it on these evils. And then the healer takes money from you and tells you, yeah, you are superior, and then you make it work, so you prove, see, I'm not just an arrogant idiot, I really am superior, because now this thing worked. Why wouldn't it work? And then the client voluntarily gives additional payment, refers other clients to the healer, and the business just continues. And I've seen this happen many, 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 many times. I'm sure you've seen it as well, but it's become such a great business. There are healers in the United States who charge $10,000 to take out a jinn. Okay? There are healers who charge $5,000, but your daughter has to live with me in my basement for the next 3 weeks so I can remove this jinn. It's become a very disgusting and vile business is what's happened. right? And the families love it. Say, well, why are we suffering so much in this house? Why am I not getting a job? Oh, it must be because my daughter has a jinn in her. Let's send her off to the healer, and the healer will take care of everything. And it's very nasty actually. And the suffering recurs because the client was never actually cured. The cure was never actually, the problem is in the client themselves. That's the problem. And it's being sidetracked because of this arrogant business, right? So if we go to the next slide, recurring problems, something very classic I've seen. Usually folks who go to these healers, they're never cured. All right, you go to a regular doctor, you get a pill, your disease is cured, and you go for follow-up appointments. Usually the problem keeps coming back. And why does it come back? It comes back because it was never cured in the first place, right? And this is very convenient. And if the healer's intervention does not work, the healer then says, oh, the magic was higher level. It has a trap door, right? And this further enforces your superiority. Wow, someone really did some major magic on me. That's why I must be very, very superior. That's why this thing is not working. And the point here is that the healer, look at the last line here, the healers are not in the business of magic, jinn, or deen. Okay? They're actually in the business of trust. They know how to exploit your trust, and they know once they have this trust on you, you're going to keep going, and you're going to keep bringing money. It's the business of trust is what it is. We'll go to the next slide. Positive thinking, or the secret behind amulets. The reason amulets work, ta'weez, the majority of ta'weez that work, they don't work because of the ta'weez itself. They work because with harakah there is barakah. With movement there is blessing. When you start to think about a cure, when you start to do something about it, the cure comes naturally. That's the idea. That's why this actually works. If we go to the next slide, there's a very interesting story. Two slides, sorry, ahead. Yeah, that's it, perfect. Yeah, the true story. There's a young man actually. He was receiving medication for depression, and for some time his girlfriend had left him. He was a non-Muslim. His girlfriend left him. He took an entire bottle of the medication. He wanted to commit suicide, so he just drank the whole bottle of medication. As soon as he finished the bottle, he said, oh my God, what did I do? Why would I try to commit suicide? And so what he did was he went to the hospital. The doctors did all these tests on him. His heart rate was lowering. He was not breathing well. And he looked like he was about to die. And he had all the vital signs decreasing and so forth. So the physicians then found out that he was actually not taking a prescribed pill. He was in a clinical trial taking a study drug. It was an investigational drug. And in that study, half the patients got placebo or a sugar pill, and the other half got the actual drug. And so the actual drug. So it turned out that he was actually taking the placebo the whole time. He was actually never taking the drug. So why did he almost die? Well, the point is they said to him, you know what, you're only taking the placebo. Everything came back to normal. So that's how placebo works. Placebo is very powerful. If you believe something's going to happen, you will make it happen. And there's books written on this. Richard Lipton has wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. Talks about how when the mind thinks of something, oops, my computer just died. Do we have a spare computer? Well, the point is that with placebo, when something happens, when you believe in something is going to happen, then it actually does happen. Maybe we take a little break here. Let me flip out the computers. Is that possible?
Yes, inshallah. We'll take a short break now, Adil bhai. We'll take a short break. Jazakallah khair. Please stay with us, inshallah, until the break is over. Then rejoin us, please. Yes, mashallah. So, a very interesting, very interesting topic by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm sure you'd all agree, and you have very many questions, and we will take the questions, inshallah, later on. It's amazing, mashallah, what the human mind can do, and this is exactly what these psychosomatic illnesses do. So, inshallah, stay with this. We're going for a short break now, and inshallah, after the break, we'll continue. Jazakumullah khair. Stay with us, please.